The pen slid across the paper like a blade carving its last wound. The ink still glistened, fresh, alive, carrying with it 32 years of my life. The contracts stacked neatly on my mahogany desk were more than paper. They were tombstones of every sleepless night, every missed birthday, every time I looked at my boy and told myself, tomorrow I'll make it up to him. 32 years. 32 million. The company was gone. King Technologies, born in this very room when Dennis was a toddler padding around in his pajamas, was no longer mine. Freedom should have tasted sweet. Instead, the air was heavy, metallic. The door burst open. No knock, no hesitation. Dennis. My son's silhouette filled the doorway, sharp in the late afternoon sun. Shoulders squared like he'd rehearsed this moment. Behind him, Wendy slid in, graceful, quiet, carrying her perfume like a second skin. He didn't say hello, didn't even glance at me. His eyes darted to the papers, to the signatures that still glowed wet under the light. His fist came down on the desk with a crack that rattled the glass paperweight. 5 million. That's what I need, Dad, and I need it now. The words didn't land like a request. They landed like a verdict. I looked up from the contract. My hand was still gripping the pen, knuckles white. I had signed away 3 decades, and the ink hadn't even dried. My chest tightened. Dennis, I said softly, I just sold the company, today. Do you know what this means? I can finally retire. That's perfect, he cut in, voice quick, eager. Then the gleam, something new in his eyes. Not pride, not joy, not love. Greed, raw, naked, unashamed. Now you can help your son. 5 million. I've got debts to cover, and I want to start my own business. His words echoed against the wood-paneled walls. The air in the office seemed to shrink, pressing against me. From the corner, Wendy's voice glided in, smooth, honeyed. It's just a little help, Lester. You've done so well. Dennis just needs a push. Her eyes lingered on the contracts, flicking back to Dennis with a flicker of calculation. A signal passed between them, silent, practiced. I stared at them both. My chest burned. Dennis, you didn't even congratulate me. This is the biggest day of my life, and you walk in here demanding money. Dennis leaned forward, palms flat on the desk. I am congratulating you. 32 million is incredible. So what's 5 to you? Nothing. Nothing. My voice cracked against the quiet. I thought of the nights I came home after Dennis was asleep, of the baseball games I missed, the birthdays where I showed up late and empty-handed because a server crashed or a client threatened to walk. His mother's death had left me with a 3-year-old boy and a dream I didn't know how to feed. King Technologies had been the lifeline, the only way I knew to keep us alive. I said, this is not just money. This is my retirement, my security. I built this. I'm your son. His voice cracked on the word son, breaking into something childlike, wounded. I deserve something for all those years you weren't a father. You were always working. Where was my father then? The words landed like ice water. Wendy stepped closer, laying a manicured hand on Dennis's arm. Maybe we can talk about this more calmly. Dennis only means that it would be wonderful if you helped us get started. I laughed once, bitter, sharp. Started? Dennis, you've been getting started for 15 years. Job after job, scheme after scheme, always needing more. Since you married Wendy, those needs have only grown. The contracts made a sharp thud as I slid them in the desk drawer. Come to the party tomorrow night. Bring Wendy's parents. We'll celebrate. I'll explain my plans for retirement, and maybe, just maybe, I'll talk about how to help you both responsibly. Dennis's laugh was cold, humorless. Responsibly? You mean like a loan? With terms? Interest? You want to play banker now? I mean like family that cares about each other's future, I said evenly. Wendy whispered something into his ear.
His jaw hardened, his shoulders straightened. "If you don't help us now," Dennis said, voice low, dangerous, "don't expect us at your party, don't expect us for dinners or holidays or anything." The air seemed to thicken, smoke without fire. I watched my son, my boy who once climbed into my lap to ask about computers, my boy who once drew crayon pictures of office buildings with me standing tall in front of them, transform into a stranger with steel in his eyes. "That's your choice, not mine," I said quietly. "The party starts at 7. His fist slammed the desk again, harder. The coffee mug jumped, spilled across the reports in a brown wave. "You're making a mistake, old man. We're your family. We deserve that money more than some savings account." Wendy tugged his arm gently, eyes never leaving mine. "Come on, honey, let's give him time." Their voices rose in the hallway, sharp, clipped. Wendy's tone was too soft to make out, but it was strategy, not comfort. Then the front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Through the blinds, I watched the BMW peel out of the driveway, tires screaming against the asphalt. Wendy was already on her phone, her lips tight, her eyes sharp. I sank back into the chair. The coffee stain spread across the financials, bleeding ink like an infection. My hand shook as I lifted the contracts again. 32 million. 30 years of building something out of nothing, and my only son looked at it like a lottery ticket. Where had I gone wrong? The phone rang. "Lester!" Jim Patterson's laugh boomed through the receiver. "My oldest rival, my oldest friend. 32 million, you magnificent bastard! Congratulations! I suppose you're throwing a party tomorrow." 7 o'clock, I said, forcing my voice steady. "Bring Martha. We wouldn't miss it. And Lester, you deserve this." After I hung up, the silence felt kinder. I called Elegant Events. Susan answered. "Mr. King, always a pleasure." 50 guests, cocktails, dinner, everything perfect. Money is no object. Her pen scratched as she wrote. "Any restrictions?" "Just make sure there's plenty. This is the most important celebration of my life." That night, the house felt too big, too empty. The contract sat in their leather folder like relics of a war no one else remembered. I poured a glass of wine, something cheap, and let it burn my throat. My phone buzzed. "Dennis!" I let it ring. Buzzed again. Then again. Finally, a text. "Dad, we need to talk. This is important." Important for him had always meant urgent for me. I stared out the kitchen window at the lawn where Dennis once played catch with my father, where he once tripped and skinned his knees and cried until I lifted him high. His laughter used to fill this space. Now his absence filled it louder. Another text. "Wendy's parents want to meet you before the party. 6 o'clock?" I stared at it for a long time. Homer and Mai Thompson, a retired teacher and a homemaker. Simple people, decent the few times I'd met them. Did they know what Dennis had demanded, or were they pawns in Wendy's game? The reflection in the glass startled me. A man older than I felt, 65. A man who had given his life to building something, only to discover that his own blood saw him as a wallet with a pulse. The bottle was half empty by the time I decided. The party would happen. My friends would celebrate me. If Dennis stayed away, it would tell me everything. I turned off the kitchen light, climbed the stairs, and sat with the family photo from the mantel. Dennis at 10, gap-toothed, grinning, holding my hand at the ribbon cutting of our first office building, his small fingers wrapped in mine with absolute trust, hero worship in his eyes. When had admiration curdled into entitlement? When had love turned into transaction? I don't know. But tomorrow, I would find out.
The morning of the party cracked open with lights so clean it felt deliberate, as if the universe itself wanted to frame my celebration in gold. Sunlight poured through the curtains and across the contract still lying in my study. $32 million. Signed, sealed, a life's work exchanged for freedom. Coffee steamed in my hands as I spread the checklist across the kitchen table. Oysters, champagne, flowers from Millfield Gardens, imported cheeses. Everything had to be perfect. For once, money wasn't a cage, it was a key. By afternoon, Susan's team had transformed my terrace into something I barely recognized. White linen stretched across tables like snow untouched by footprints. Crystal glasses gleamed in rows that caught the fading light. The air carried a promise of music, soft jazz humming from speakers hidden behind flower arrangements. "This is extraordinary," I murmured, walking among the tables. "Mr. King, the appetizer trays are ready for approval." Susan's assistant, Sarah, approached with the grace of someone who had worked hundreds of events. She uncovered the silver trays, crab cakes dusted with herbs, chocolate-dipped strawberries gleaming like jewels. I tasted one, the sweetness bursting across my tongue. Perfect. Everything must be perfect. For afternoon, Susan's team had transformed my terrace into something I barely recognized. White linen stretched across tables like snow untouched by footprints. Crystal glasses gleamed in rows that caught the fading light. The air carried a promise of music, soft jazz humming from speakers hidden behind flower arrangements. "This is extraordinary," I murmured, walking among the tables. "Mr. King, the appetizer trays are ready for approval." Susan's assistant, Sarah, approached with the grace of someone who had worked hundreds of events. She uncovered the silver trays, crab cakes dusted with herbs, chocolate-dipped strawberries gleaming like jewels. I tasted one, the sweetness bursting across my tongue. Perfect. Everything must be perfect. For afternoon, Susan's team had transformed my terrace into something I barely recognized. White linen stretched across tables like snow untouched by footprints. Crystal glasses gleamed in rows that caught the fading light. The air carried a promise of music, soft jazz humming from speakers hidden behind flower arrangements. "This is extraordinary," I murmured, walking among the tables. "Mr. King, the appetizer trays are ready for approval." Susan's assistant, Sarah, approached with the grace of someone who had worked hundreds of events. She uncovered the silver trays, crab cakes dusted with herbs, chocolate-dipped strawberries gleaming like jewels. I tasted one, the sweetness bursting across my tongue. Perfect. Everything must be perfect. At 4, I stood on the terrace, looking out across my manicured lawn, the fountain in the distance catching the last of the daylight. The party was almost breathing on its own. This was what money should do. Not pay off debts or buy faster cars, not disappear into Dennis's endless pit of starts. No, money should create beauty, memories, a night people would talk about for years. I smoothed my tie in the hallway mirror. The grandfather clock chimed 6:30. Guests would soon arrive. The first ring of the doorbell jolted me. I opened it to Jim Patterson, my oldest friend, his laughter already booming. He hugged me so hard I almost dropped the champagne bottle I held. Martha followed, smiling warmly. "Lester, this house looks like something out of a magazine," she said. "You deserve this, my friend," Jim added. $32 million, who would have thought it? Others soon followed. Frank Morrison from the bank, still sharp at 72. Dr. Chen, whose calm hands had carried me through a heart scare 10 years ago. Neighbors who had seen King Technologies rise from my garage to a corporation. Each arrival stitched the evening together with congratulations, laughter, and the soft clinking of glasses. By 7, the terrace was alive.
Candles flickering, conversations flowing, jazz weaving between them all. I felt whole. For the first time in years, I felt surrounded by people who understood me, not for what I could give them, but for what I had built. Headlights swept the driveway, the BMW. My chest tightened as Dennis stepped out, Wendy's hand in his. Her dress was a blade of black silk, every movement deliberate. From the back seat emerged Homer and Mai, her parents, dressed in their Sunday best, nervous smiles plastered across their faces. I opened the door and Dennis's voice was soft, practiced. "Dad, I owe you an apology." Homer stepped forward, his handshake firm. "Congratulations, Lester. You've done something remarkable." My smile was warm, genuine. "We're honored to be here." For a moment, I let myself believe reconciliation was possible, that perhaps Dennis had remembered how to be my son again. Inside, the party swallowed them with warmth. Jim shook Homer's hand enthusiastically, already trading stories about teaching. Martha pulled Mai toward the garden lights. Even Wendy charmed my friends, complimenting the flowers, asking thoughtful questions about retirement plans. Dennis raised his glass to me from across the terrace, a silent salute. For the first time that day, the ache in my chest loosened. By 8, the terrace was glowing with life, laughter, stories, the clink of forks against china. People drifted in small groups, weaving connections across decades. Dennis moved easily among them, his charm polished, his laughter ringing with authenticity. Maybe, just maybe, I thought. My phone buzzed in my pocket. My attorney's number. Harold. I stepped inside, pulling the French doors shut behind me, and answered by the window overlooking the terrace. "Lester?" Harold said, his voice brisk. "The buyer's back needs confirmation about Monday's transfer." Through the glass, I could see the party breathing without me. Jim gesturing wildly, Martha laughing, Dennis animated in conversation. And then my eyes caught her, Wendy. She moved with the grace of someone who knew exactly how much attention she attracted and how much she didn't. She drifted toward the drink table, her back angled to most of the guests. Her hand slipped into her clutch. Something small. White. A packet. My breath stilled. She glanced left. Right. Smooth. Practiced. Then with a flick of her wrist, she tipped the packet over the rim of my wine glass. A fine powder drifted into the red liquid, vanishing instantly. She picked up a silver stirrer, swirled once, twice, 3 times. Pocketed the evidence, and smiled at Sarah like she'd just adjusted a napkin. My mouth went dry. "Lester?" Harold asked. "You still there?" "Yes," I said. My voice sounded distant. "Yes, I'm here." Through the glass, I could see Wendy rejoining the others, her smile perfect, her hands calm. "She poisoned me," I whispered to no one. "Pardon?" Harold said. "Nothing. Monday's fine." I hung up. The room felt small, suffocating. My heartbeat thundered. She wanted me dead, tonight, among my friends. My son smiling in the background, oblivious. She thought it would look like a heart attack. A 65-year-old man celebrating with wine and champagne. Who would question it? But she made one mistake. She didn't know I was watching. I stepped out onto the terrace, my smile fixed, my body screaming. Wendy's eyes flicked immediately to the wine glass. Her expression softened in satisfaction. "Everything settled?" she asked sweetly. "Just paperwork," I said, moving naturally back to the group.
She tilted her head. Then, perhaps it's time for a toast. Yes, I said, voice calm, steady. A toast. Jim clapped his hands together. Absolutely, to Lester and 32 million well-earned dollars. All eyes turned toward me. The wine glass gleamed under candlelight, waiting. Wendy's gaze burned into me, urging, demanding. I looked at the glass, then at Homer, sitting nearby, his own untouched red just inches away. Time slowed. I moved closer, chatting casually with him about retirement, national parks, anything to keep him talking. My hand drifted, natural, unremarkable.
In 3 seconds that looked like nothing at all, I switched the glasses. Her poison now waited in Homer's glass. Wendy didn't notice. She was watching me, only me. Dennis emerged from the kitchen carrying champagne flutes, eager, smiling. Everything's ready for the toast. Wendy positioned herself perfectly, her eyes locked on my hand. She wanted to see me lift that glass. She wanted to see me die. I raised it high. Friends, I said, my voice carrying across the terrace, tonight is the most meaningful night of my life. 30 years of sacrifice, 30 years of building something from nothing. Tonight, I stand surrounded by people who matter most. The guests leaned in, smiling, glasses raised. But I looked directly at Wendy. And tonight, I said, my smile cold, we toast to loyalty and to betrayal. Gasps, confused looks. Dennis blinked, unsure. Because not everyone here tonight came to celebrate. Someone came to kill me. A stunned silence fell like glass shattering. Wendy's face froze, the color draining as her eyes darted to the wine glass in mine hand. And then I turned, my gaze locking on to Homer. Don't drink that wine, it's poisoned. The glass trembled in his hand, inches from his lips. The party erupted into chaos. The words had barely left my mouth when the terrace erupted. Gasps, the scrape of chairs against stone. A woman's hand shot to her lips. Glasses clinked as people lowered them, uncertain, frightened. Jazz still whispered from the hidden speakers, absurd in its calm, like a soundtrack that hadn't realized the scene had changed. Poison? Frank Morrison croaked, his face blanching. What the hell are you talking about, Lester? All eyes turned to me, to Wendy, to Homer, frozen mid-motion, with the wineglass trembling inches from his mouth. Don't drink, I thundered again. My voice carried the weight of absolute command. Homer's hand shook violently as he lowered the glass. Mai clutched his wrist, pulling it away from his lips with a sob. Every guest stared. The candlelight flickered across faces wide with horror. I turned deliberately, my gaze locking on Wendy. Would you like to explain what you just put in my drink? For the first time all evening, her composure cracked. Her smile faltered, then snapped back into place. What on earth are you talking about, Lester? This is insane. I saw you, my voice cut like glass. While I was on the phone inside, you poured powder from a packet into my wine. You stirred it. Then you pocketed the evidence. A collective intake of breath swelled from the crowd. Wendy, Dennis said, eyes darting between us, his voice shaking. Tell him he's wrong. Tell everyone. Wendy's eyes darted, calculating, flicking across the crowd like a trapped animal searching for an exit. This is ridiculous, she snapped. I adjusted the glasses, that's all. Lester must have misseen. Stop! I stepped forward, pointing at the trembling glass still in Homer's hand. That was mine. I switched them. If he had taken one sip, he would already be dying. Homer's knees buckled. Mai caught him, her own face stricken with disbelief and grief. Tears welled in her eyes. Our daughter, she whispered, shaking her head. No, no, it can't be. "Dad, please," Dennis said, his voice cracking, panic rising. "Maybe you're mistaken. Maybe—" "Enough!" I roared. The word silenced everything. Even the cicadas in the garden seemed to pause. My finger jabbed toward Wendy. She tried to murder me and nearly murder her own father in the process. Gasps swept across the terrace. Guests recoiled, murmuring. Martha Patterson covered her mouth with trembling fingers. Jim stepped forward protectively, putting himself between me and the chaos. "Lester, are you absolutely sure?" Jim asked firmly. "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. My voice was steel. "I saw it with my own eyes." Wendy's mask finally cracked. The calm smile twisted into panic. Her hand darted toward the table, snatching at Homer's glass. "Don't!" I shouted, lunging forward, but she was faster. With a flick of her wrist, she knocked the glass to the ground. It shattered against the stone terrace, the red wine splattering like blood across the pale linen. Shards sparkled in the candlelight. "Oh no!" Wendy cried theatrically, pressing her hand to her chest. "How clumsy of me!" The silence that followed was deafening. No one believed her. Her mistake was too obvious, too perfectly timed. "That wasn't clumsy," Sarah said, the young assistant caterer, her voice trembling but loud enough for all to hear. "That was deliberate." Guests exchanged horrified looks. "How convenient," Jim muttered grimly, eyes narrowing on Wendy. Dennis turned to his wife, his face a mask of shock. "Wendy, what did you do?" She spun on him, eyes wild. "Nothing! He's lying! Lester's confused, old, tired. He imagines things." "I imagined you destroying the evidence," I said coldly. "I imagined a packet, the stirrer." Her voice rose into hysteria. "This is a witch hunt! You're all against me!" But Dennis's expression was changing. His eyes narrowed, his breathing quickened. He looked at me, then at the shards on the ground, then back to his wife. "Wendy," he whispered, his voice trembling with dawning realization. "Tell me the truth. Did you—" "Of course not," she snapped. "Dennis, don't be stupid. He's manipulating you. He never wanted us to succeed. He's turning you against him because you stood up to him." Dennis's face twisted with conflict, torn between the woman he married and the father he resented but loved. His lips trembled. Around us, the guests closed in a half circle, their shock hardening into disgust. Mai suddenly broke, her sobs tearing through the night. She fell to her knees beside the shattered glass, clutching at Homer's sleeve. "You tried to kill him," she wept, staring at her daughter with eyes full of betrayal. "Your own father, my husband, our family." "No!" Wendy shrieked, panic rising to fever pitch. "I would never—" Homer, usually steady as an oak, stood trembling. His voice broke as he looked at Wendy. "Is it true?" His eyes searched hers, desperate for denial, for any shred of the daughter he thought he knew. Wendy faltered. Her lips parted, but no words came. Her silence was louder than any confession. Homer staggered back as though struck. The man's face collapsed in on itself, his dignity shredded. "God help me! It's true!" The crowd murmured, outrage growing like thunder. "Dad," Dennis stammered, stepping toward me now, desperation in his voice. Maybe it wasn't poison, maybe—" "Stop protecting her," I cut in, my voice hard as iron. "Look at her, Dennis. Look at what she just did. She tried to murder me, and if I hadn't switched glasses, your wife would have killed her own father instead." Dennis's hands trembled. He turned to Wendy, tears beginning to rim his eyes. "Why? Why would you do this?" Her voice cracked into shards. "For us, Dennis, for our future. Don't you see? He was never going to give us the money. He was going to dangle it like a leash around your neck forever. This was the only way. With him gone, everything would come to us." The words spilled out before she could stop them. The crowd gasped again. Dennis stumbled backward as though she'd struck him. "Oh, my God!" Wendy's chest rose and fell rapidly, panic consuming her. "Dennis, please," she spun against Dennis. "You said you wanted to be free. You said you needed money. I did this for you." "For me?" he whispered, horror etched into every line of his face. "You tried to kill my father, and you almost killed yours." His voice broke on the last word. The terrace was no longer a celebration, it was a courtroom. Murmurs murmured like a jury deliberating. The shattered wineglass sparkled in the candlelight like evidence laid bare. Jim stepped forward, voice cold and lawyerly. We all heard her. She admitted motive. She destroyed the evidence. There's no mistaking it. Dr. Chen added gravely, Lester, your quick thinking saved Homer's life tonight. Frank Morrison muttered, I've seen corporate betrayals, but nothing like this. The judgment in their voices was final. Wendy's mask was gone. She spun in circles, eyes wild, as if searching for an ally among the faces that had all turned against her. Finally, she locked onto Dennis. Dennis, she pleaded, grabbing his arm, tell them they're wrong. Tell them you love me. But Dennis's face was broken. He pulled his arm away as though her touch burned. I don't even know who you are anymore. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks, her breath ragged. You're all insane. He's turning you against me. This was supposed to be our night. Her scream shattered the night. And then she bolted. She grabbed her purse from the chair, high heels cracking against the stone. She stormed across the terrace, shoving past startled guests. Wendy, Dennis called after her, but his voice was hollow. The front door slammed. Seconds later, the BMW engine roared to life. Tires squealed against the asphalt, fading into the distance. Silence fell. The guests remained frozen, stunned by what they had witnessed. The terrace still smelled of flowers and wine, but the air had turned heavy, sour. Mai wept softly, her hands covering her face. Homer stood rigid, staring at the shattered glass as though it were a gravestone. I'm so sorry, Homer whispered finally, his voice breaking. We didn't know. We didn't raise her for this. I placed a hand on his shoulder, firm, steady. This is not your fault. You are good people. She made her own choices. But she is our daughter, Mai sobbed, and tonight she almost killed us all. The words hung in the night like smoke. Dennis stood apart, pale, broken, staring into nothing. His lips moved, but no sound came. He was a man unmoored, his entire world ripped open. I looked around at my guests. Their faces showed the truth, admiration, horror, relief, all at once. Tonight, I said quietly, we saw what greed looks like when it wears the mask of love, and we saw how quickly masks can fall. The terrace remained silent, the only sound the wind stirring the garden lights. The celebration was over. The reckoning had begun.
The night refused to settle. Even after Wendy's BMW screeched down the street and vanished into darkness, the terrace pulsed with unease. The candles still burned, the music still drifted from the speakers, but nothing was the same. Glasses sat untouched. Plates of food cooled under the night air. What was supposed to be a celebration had turned into a crime scene without police tape. Guests huddled in small knots, whispering. Every word felt heavier than the wine that stained the stone floor. Jim Patterson stood with his wife Martha near the fountain. His booming laugh, so natural earlier, was gone, replaced by sharp whispers. "Attempted murder," I heard him mutter, "in front of 50 witnesses. My God!" Frank Morrison lit a cigarette with trembling hands, exhaling smoke like a confession. "I always said ambition could rot people from the inside. But to see it here, in this house?" Dr. Chen hovered by Homer, checking his pulse, though the man insisted he was fine. Still, his hands trembled like reeds in wind. Mai sat beside him, eyes swollen from tears, clutching a tissue that was already shredded from her grip. I stood near the shattered glass, staring at the crimson stain on the stone. The candles made it look fresh, alive, like blood that hadn't yet dried. It could have been mine. Dennis lingered on the edge of the terrace, arms folded tight, head bowed. He hadn't spoken since Wendy fled. His shoulders shook, once, twice, as if he were holding something back. Finally, he lifted his face toward me. His eyes were wet, red-rimmed. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking, "tell me this isn't real. Tell me Wendy didn't just try to kill you." Every eye turned toward us. The silence pressed in. I looked at my son, my only child, the boy I had once carried on my shoulders through the rain, the boy who had slept beside my desk on nights when I couldn't put the company down. "She did, Dennis," I said quietly, firmly. I watched her. His lips parted, a wounded sound escaping, part sob, part denial. "But why? Why would she—" I cut in sharper now. "She admitted it. She said she did it for you, for money, for freedom. Her words, not mine." Dennis staggered back as though I had struck him. His hand went to his hair, pulling hard. "No, no, no!" He turned, pacing like a man trapped in a cage. She said she loved me. She wanted us to have a future. How do I believe that and this at the same time?" "Because actions speak louder than words," Jim said suddenly, his voice hard, slicing through the silence. "She tried to kill your father, Dennis. If Lester hadn't switched classes, your wife's father would be dead right now. Do you understand that?" The words landed like hammer blows. Homer flinched, his face crumpling. Mai sobbed again, clutching his arm. Dennis's gaze flicked toward them. For the first time, he seemed to realize the full scope, not just betrayal, not just greed, but the near murder of the very people who raised Wendy. "God!" Dennis whispered. His knees buckled, and he sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. I stepped closer to Homer and Mai. They looked so small now, so broken. "Homer," I said softly, "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve this. None of us did. We raised her better. I swear to God we did. She was our little girl, smart, kind, driven. We never imagined this." "This is not your fault," I said firmly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "She made her own choices tonight. You can't carry her guilt." Mai shook her head violently. "But she's our daughter, our flesh and blood. How can we not feel it?" Her sobs cracked the night open again. I tightened my grip on Homer's shoulder, steady, anchoring. "Family is not just blood, it's character. Tonight you stood here innocent. You are good people. Whatever Wendy has become, that's her path, not yours." Homer's lips trembled, but he nodded once, slowly. The guests began to drift toward the exits, their congratulations replaced with solemn handshakes and murmured reassurances. "Call us if you need anything," Martha said, squeezing my hand. "You handled it better than anyone else could have," Jim said gravely, his eyes lingering on Dennis, who still sat broken in the chair. One by one they departed, their footsteps fading, their cars slipping into the night. By 10, only family remained. The terrace was a graveyard of wine glasses, half-eaten plates, and the shattered remains of trust. Dennis finally lifted his head. His eyes were hollow. "Dad," he said, voice raw. "Everything she said, about me, about debts, It's true. I owe money. A lot. Wendy pushed me to ask you. She said 5 million would fix everything. My stomach twisted. How much? I asked coldly. He hesitated, shame carving deep lines into his face. 7, maybe 8. The words hung between us like a guillotine. Homer let out a strangled sound, disbelief and grief mingling. You dragged our daughter into this mess? No, Dennis shot back, his voice cracking. She dragged me. I had debts, yes, but she pushed me. Every step. More cars, more apartments, more investments. She said it was for our future, and I believed her. His voice broke entirely, his chest heaving. I thought she loved me. The night air was cold now. It bit my skin. The night refused to settle. Even after Wendy's BMW screeched down the street and vanished into darkness, the terrace pulsed with unease. The candles still burned. The music still drifted from the speakers, but nothing was the same. Glasses sat untouched. Plates of food cooled under the night air. What was supposed to be a celebration had turned into a crime scene without police tape. Guests huddled in small knots, whispering. Every word felt heavier than the wine that stained the stone floor. Jim Patterson stood with his wife Martha near the fountain. His booming laugh, so natural earlier, was gone, replaced by sharp whispers. "Attempted murder," I heard him mutter, "in front of 50 witnesses. My God!" Frank Morrison lit a cigarette with trembling hands, exhaling smoke like a confession. "I always said ambition could rot people from the inside. But to see it here, in this house?" Dr. Chen hovered by Homer, checking his pulse, though the man insisted he was fine. Still, his hands trembled like reeds in wind. Mai sat beside him, eyes swollen from tears, clutching a tissue that was already shredded from her grip. I stood near the shattered glass, staring at the crimson stain on the stone. The candles made it look fresh, alive, like blood that hadn't yet dried. It could have been mine. Dennis lingered on the edge of the terrace, arms folded tight, head bowed. He hadn't spoken since Wendy fled. His shoulders shook, once, twice, as if he were holding something back. Finally, he lifted his face toward me. His eyes were wet, red-rimmed. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking, "tell me this isn't real. Tell me Wendy didn't just try to kill you." Every eye turned toward us. The silence pressed in. I looked at my son, my only child, the boy I had once carried on my shoulders through the rain, the boy who had slept beside my desk on nights when I couldn't put the company down. "She did, Dennis," I said quietly, firmly. I watched her. His lips parted, a wounded sound escaping, part sob, part denial. "But why? Why would she—" I cut in sharper now. "She admitted it. She said she did it for you, for money, for freedom. Her words, not mine." Dennis staggered back as though I had struck him. His hand went to his hair, pulling hard. "No, no, no!" He turned, pacing like a man trapped in a cage. She said she loved me. She wanted us to have a future. How do I believe that and this at the same time?" "Because actions speak louder than words," Jim said suddenly, his voice hard, slicing through the silence. She tried to kill your father, Dennis. If Lester hadn't switched classes, your wife's father would be dead right now. Do you understand that?" The words landed like hammer blows. Homer flinched, his face crumpling. Mai sobbed again, clutching his arm. Dennis's gaze flicked toward them. For the first time, he seemed to realize the full scope, not just betrayal, not just greed, but the near murder of the very people who raised Wendy. "God!" Dennis whispered. His knees buckled, and he sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. I stepped closer to Homer and Mai. They looked so small now, so broken. "Homer," I said softly, "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve this. None of us did. We raised her better. I swear to God we did. She was our little girl, smart, kind, driven. We never imagined this." "This is not your fault," I said firmly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "She made her own choices tonight. You can't carry her guilt." Mai shook her head violently. "But she's our daughter, our flesh and blood. How can we not feel it?" Her sobs cracked the night open again. I tightened my grip on Homer's shoulder, steady, anchoring. "Family is not just blood, it's character. Tonight you stood here innocent. You are good people. Whatever Wendy has become, that's her path, not yours." Homer's lips trembled, but he nodded once, slowly. The guests began to drift toward the exits, their congratulations replaced with solemn handshakes and murmured reassurances. "Call us if you need anything," Martha said, squeezing my hand. "You handled it better than anyone else could have," Jim said gravely, his eyes lingering on Dennis, who still sat broken in the chair. One by one they departed, their footsteps fading, their cars slipping into the night. By 10, only family remained. The terrace was a graveyard of wine glasses, half-eaten plates, and the shattered remains of trust. Dennis finally lifted his head. His eyes were hollow. "Dad," he said, voice raw. "Everything she said, about me, about debts, it's true. I owe money, a lot. Wendy pushed me to ask you. She said 5 million would fix everything." My stomach twisted. "How much?" I asked coldly. He hesitated, shame carving deep lines into his face. 7, maybe 8. The words hung between us like a guillotine. Homer let out a strangled sound, disbelief and grief mingling. "You dragged our daughter into this mess?" "No," Dennis shot back, his voice cracking. "She dragged me. I had debts, yes, but she pushed me. Every step. More cars, more apartments, more investments. She said it was for our future, and I believed her." His voice broke entirely, his chest heaving. "I thought she loved me." The night air was cold now. It bit my skin.
I took a deep breath. "Dennis, you let her twist you, but you're still responsible. Don't you see? She nearly killed me tonight. She almost killed her own father. And she did it because you couldn't say no." He flinched, the words cutting deep. "I know," he whispered. "God help me, I know." Mai finally spoke, her voice hollow. "What happens now?" The question hung, heavier than any wine-soaked linen, heavier than the contracts still waiting in my study. "Now," I said slowly, "we deal with the truth. Wendy has debts we don't know about.
She may have enemies we haven't seen. Tonight wasn't just desperation. It was strategy, planned, cold. That kind of poison isn't something you pick up on a whim. Homer shuddered. You think she's done this before? I think, I said grimly, she's capable of more than we realize. The silence that followed was suffocating. Dennis lifted his head again, eyes hollow but burning. Dad, I don't know what to do. You make a choice. You decide who you are. You can keep chasing easy money, letting people like Wendy drag you deeper. Or you can take responsibility, face your mistakes, earn back trust. His lip trembled. Would you ever forgive me? I studied him for a long moment, the broken boy in a man's suit, the son I had raised alone, the stranger who had demanded millions like they were scraps. I'll forgive you, I said slowly, when you earn it, not with words, with actions. Until then, forgiveness is a door you have to build yourself. He lowered his gaze, silent. The grandfather clock inside struck 11. The party was officially dead. Homer helped Mai to her feet. They both looked 10 years older than they had when they arrived. We should go, Homer said quietly. This isn't our house to heal. But Lester, thank you for saving my life tonight. I shook his hand firmly. No, thank you for showing me what family really means. Mai hugged me, fragile as glass. Her tears wet my shoulder. I'm so sorry, she whispered. When they left, only Dennis and I remained. The terrace was silent. The candles sputtered out one by one, sending thin threads of smoke into the night sky. Dennis stared at the shattered glass, his voice barely audible. I don't know how to live with this. I placed a hand on his shoulder, firm but not soft. Then start by choosing to live differently. He nodded once, broken, but I saw something flicker, maybe regret, maybe resolve. Inside, the contracts waited in their leather portfolio. $32 million, a lifetime of sacrifice. I looked at my son, at the man he had become, at the man he might still be. Tonight, one truth became clear. Wealth doesn't just buy freedom. It reveals enemies, sometimes the ones closest to you. And this war, I realized, wasn't over. Wendy had failed tonight, but she wouldn't stop. The game had only just begun.
His face twisted. She did it for me, for us, because I asked you for money. I slammed my fist on the table, the sound ricocheting through the room. Don't you dare put this on me. You had debts, yes. You made choices, yes. But she took it to poison, to murder. That was her decision. He flinched, like a boy being scolded. For a moment I saw the child I'd raised, terrified, ashamed. By noon, news vans had parked at the edge of the street. Cameras pointed at my house like rifles. The story had leaked. Tech mogul targeted in poisoning plot. The headlines read on my phone, my name, my company, my family, all reduced to sensational copy. The phone rang nonstop. Journalists, business partners, even old acquaintances sniffing around for gossip. I ignored them all. But the worst call came from my attorney, Harold. Lester. His voice was tight, clipped. The buyers are nervous. This news, it complicates things. They don't want scandal tied to the acquisition. My chest constricted. The contracts are signed. Signed, yes, but not closed. Until funds transfer, they have outs. If this poisoning becomes a media circus, they may argue reputational harm. They could renegotiate or walk. $32 million. slipping like sand through my fingers. All because of her. By evening, the police had returned with questions about Wendy's finances. Apparently, she had opened credit lines under Dennis's name, gambling debts, investment scams, luxury purchases, hundreds of thousands, maybe more. Dennis sat pale and silent as they listed account after account. "She was supposed to handle the money," he whispered when they left. "She said she was good with numbers. I didn't even look." "You let her blindfold you, and she walked you straight into ruin." His tears welled in his eyes. "I thought she was my partner, my family." I shook my head. "No, she was a parasite, and now she's exposed." That night, Dennis couldn't sit still. He paced the living room, muttering, "If she goes to prison, what happens to me? To us? Do I carry her debts? Do I lose everything?" "You already lost everything," I snapped. "Last night proved that." He stopped, eyes flashing. "And what about you, Dad? You've got 32 million. You'll be fine. But me? I'm drowning. And it's partly your fault. You weren't there. You buried yourself in work and left me to figure life out alone. Maybe that's why I ended up with her." The words were a knife. I steadied my breath. I may have failed as a father in some ways, but I didn't raise you to choose greed over love. That was your choice. He broke then, collapsing onto the couch, sobbing like the boy I hadn't seen in years. I watched him, torn between anger and pity. My son, my blood, caught in the wreckage of a woman's ambition and his own weakness. At midnight, the phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered. Lester. The voice was low, female, familiar. Wendy. My blood turned to ice. "You think you've won?" she said, her tone calm, almost amused. "But you don't understand. You ruined my life. You turned Dennis against me. Do you think I'll just disappear? Where are you?" I demanded. She laughed softly. "Somewhere you'll never find me. But know this, I'm not finished. That money should have been ours. If I can't have it, neither will you." The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly, my hand trembling. She was still out there, free, dangerous. And this wasn't over. I stood by the window, staring into the dark street lined with news vans and flashing cameras. Inside, Dennis lay passed out on the couch, broken and lost. I realized then, my fortune wasn't freedom. It was bait. And predators circled closer with each passing hour.